The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty ranch as Elena Mitchell stood by her father's bedside. Old Tom Mitchell was dying, and everyone in the territory knew it. His weathered hands, once strong enough to rope wild cattle, now trembled as he reached for his daughter's face. "Listen to me, girl," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the desert wind rattling the windows. "That black mare in the corral, she's special. More special than any horse I've ever known." Elena glanced toward the window where she could see the magnificent creature pacing restlessly in the wooden enclosure. The horse was beautiful beyond words, jet black with a mane that flowed like silk in the wind. But beauty was deceiving when it came to this particular animal. "Papa, that horse nearly killed Jake Rodriguez last month," Elena reminded him. "And before that, she broke Billy Thompson's ribs. Nobody can ride her." Her father's eyes grew distant, as if he was seeing something from long ago. "Your mama, she was wild like that mare when I first met her. Took patience to win her heart. Took understanding." He coughed, and Elena could see the pain in his face. "Promise me something, daughter. Anything, Papa. Any man who wants to marry you. He's got to prove himself first. He's got to ride that mare. If he can't handle her spirit without breaking it, he ain't worthy of yours either." Elena wanted to protest. The condition seemed impossible, maybe even cruel, but her father's grip on her hand tightened with surprising strength. "Promise me," he repeated. "I promise, Papa." 3 days later, Tom Mitchell was buried in the small cemetery overlooking the valley. Elena stood alone at the graveside, wondering how she was going to manage the ranch by herself. She was 23 years old, capable and strong, but running a cattle operation in Apache territory was dangerous work for anyone, let alone a woman alone. The funeral brought visitors from towns 50 miles away. Word traveled fast in the desert about old Tom's unusual last request. By evening, Elena's kitchen was filled with neighbors sharing stories and offering help. But she could see the calculating looks in some of the men's eyes. A woman with a prosperous ranch was quite a catch, especially one as pretty as Elena Mitchell. "That's a mighty fine spread you got here," said Buck Carson, the banker's son from Tucson. He'd been trying to court Elena for over a year. Shame to see it without a man to run it proper. Elena served him coffee with a tight smile. "The ranch runs just fine, thank you." "Course it does, darlin'. But your daddy's condition, well, that's gonna make things interesting." Buck glanced toward the corral where the black mare stood silhouetted against the sunset. "You really gonna hold every suitor to that crazy promise?" Before Elena could answer, her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, spoke up. "That horse is cursed, mark my words. She's hurt every man who's tried to ride her. Your father was a good man, Elena, but that condition of his might as well be a death sentence." Elena walked to the window and watched the mare. The horse moved with a grace that took her breath away. But there was something in her movements that spoke of pain. Not physical pain, the mare was clearly strong and healthy. It was something deeper, something in her spirit that seemed broken. "She wasn't always like this," Elena said quietly. "I remember when Papa first brought her home. She was young, maybe 2 years old, beautiful but not wild like she is now." "What changed her?" asked Jim Foster, who owned the spread to the north. Elena shook her head. "I don't know. One day she was skittish but manageable. The next she was different. Like something had hurt her real deep. And she decided never to trust again." Over the following weeks, Elena tried to settle into her new life as the sole owner of the Mitchell Ranch. The work was hard, but she'd been helping her father since she could walk. She knew every inch of the property, every waterhole, every danger. What she hadn't expected was the parade of suitors who began arriving. First came Buck Carson, confident and loud. He strutted into the corral with a rope and spurs, declaring he'd have the mare broken in an hour. The horse took one look at his aggressive approach and charged. Buck barely made it over the fence before she could strike him with her hooves. His confidence disappeared along with his dignity. Next was Pete Wilson from the neighboring county. He brought a bag of tricks, ropes, bridles, even a special saddle designed for difficult horses. The mare wanted nothing to do with any of it. She bucked and reared and fought with such fury that Pete gave up after 20 minutes, declaring the horse was possessed by devil's word spread quickly about the impossible challenge at the Mitchell Ranch. Some men came out of genuine interest in Elena. Others came just to prove they were man enough to ride the unrideable horse. All of them failed. Elena began to feel guilty. Was she really going to hold to her father's dying wish when it seemed like it might get someone killed? The mare had grown more violent with each attempt, as if the repeated challenges were making her angrier and more determined to fight. Maybe you should just let the horse be, suggested Dr. Morrison when he came to check on Elena after Pete. Wilson's attempt left him with a dislocated shoulder. Your father meant well, but some animals just can't be tamed. That night, Elena sat on her porch watching the mare pace in the moonlight. The horse never seemed to rest peacefully. Even when she wasn't being challenged by would-be riders, she moved restlessly, as if something was always bothering her. What happened to you, girl? Elena whispered. What made you so afraid? As if hearing her voice, the mare stopped pacing and turned toward the house. For just a moment, Elena could swear she saw something different in the horse's eyes. Not anger or wildness, but loneliness. The same loneliness Elena felt every day since her father died. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Maria Santos, who worked at the trading post, came riding up to the ranch with excitement in her voice. Elena, you'll never believe what I heard at the post yesterday. There's an Apache brave asking questions about you and that horse of yours. Elena's heart skipped. Relations between the settlers and the Apache had been peaceful recently, but they were always delicate. An Apache showing interest in her situation could mean any number of things. What kind of questions? Elena asked. About your father's condition. About the horse. He seemed real interested in the whole story. Maria leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. They say he's from the band that camps up in the mountains. Name's Running Wolf, and he's got quite a reputation. What kind of reputation? As a horse trainer. They say he can gentle any animal, no matter how wild. Maria's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Word is he's thinking about accepting your father's challenge. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. An Apache warrior wanting to marry her was complicated enough. But one willing to risk his life on her father's impossible condition? That was something she'd never expected. As she watched the black mare that evening, Elena found herself wondering what tomorrow would bring. Would this Running Wolf really come? And if he did, would he end up like all the others, defeated by a horse that seemed determined never to be ridden? Little did Elena know that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. The morning sun was just painting the desert hills gold when Elena heard the sound of approaching horses. She stepped onto her porch, shading her eyes against the bright light, and saw 3 riders coming down the dusty trail toward her ranch. Even from a distance, she could tell they weren't ordinary visitors. The riders moved with a fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime spent in the saddle. Their horses were beautiful, painted ponies with flowing manes and intelligent eyes. But it was the lead rider who caught Elena's attention. He sat tall and straight, his long black hair braided with small feathers and beads that caught the morning light. Elena's heart began to race. This had to be Running Wolf. The 3 men stopped at the edge of her property, clearly waiting for permission to approach. Elena appreciated the courtesy. She walked down from the porch and gestured for them to come closer. Running Wolf dismounted with easy grace and approached her on foot, leaving his horse with the other 2 men who remained mounted. He was younger than Elena had expected, probably close to her own age, with kind eyes and strong features. When he spoke, his English was clear and careful. You are Tom Mitchell's daughter, he said. It wasn't a question. I am. Elena Mitchell. She kept her voice steady, though her pulse was racing. You must be Running Wolf, he nodded. I heard about your father's condition, about the horse that cannot be ridden. Elena glanced toward the corral where the black mare stood watching the strangers with suspicious eyes. That's her. Her name is Tempest, and she's hurt every man who's tried to ride her. Why do you think your father made this condition? Running Wolf asked. The question surprised Elena. Most of the men who'd come to attempt the challenge hadn't cared about her father's reasons. They just wanted to prove themselves or win her hand or both. He said any man who couldn't handle her spirit without breaking it wasn't worthy of mine either, Elena replied honestly. Running Wolf studied her face for a long moment, then looked toward the corral. Your father was a wise man. May I see the horse? Elena led him toward the wooden enclosure, very aware of the 2 mounted Apache watching from a respectful distance. As they approached, Tempest lifted her head and snorted, her ears flattening against her skull. She doesn't like strangers, Elena warned, especially men. But something strange happened as Running Wolf neared the fence. Instead of charging or rearing as she usually did, Tempest backed away and stood perfectly still, watching him with what looked like curiosity rather than anger. "She is beautiful," Running Wolf said softly, "and very afraid." Afraid? Elena had never thought of Tempest as afraid. Angry, yes. Wild and dangerous, certainly. But afraid? She doesn't act afraid. She acts fierce. Sometimes they are the same thing. Running Wolf placed his hands on the fence rail but made no move to climb over or reach toward the horse. Fear can make any creature fight harder than courage ever could. Elena studied his profile as he watched Tempest. There was something peaceful about Running Wolf, something that made her want to trust him despite barely knowing him. The other men, they all tried force. Ropes and spurs and breaking techniques. None of it worked. Force teaches fear. Fear teaches fighting. He glanced at her. "Your father's horse has learned to fight very well. So you think she can be ridden?" Running Wolf was quiet for a long time, his dark eyes never leaving the mare. "I think she can be healed." The word sent a shiver through Elena. Healed. Not broken, not conquered, not tamed. Healed. "What would you need to try?" Elena asked. "Time," Running Wolf replied. "Patience. And your permission to spend time here near her without trying to ride her." Elena frowned. "Without trying to ride her? But that's the challenge. That's what my father said." "Your father said I must ride her to marry you. He did not say I must do it today." Running Wolf turned to face her fully. "Some wounds take time to heal. If I am to win your hand through this challenge, I want to do it the right way." Elena felt something flutter in her chest. None of the other suitors had talked about doing things the right way. They just wanted to get the challenge over with and claim their prize. "How much time?" she asked. "I do not know. The horse will tell me when she is ready." Elena looked back toward Tempest, who was still watching them with those intelligent, wary eyes. The whole territory is talking about this challenge. People come from miles away to watch the attempts. If you're here for weeks or months without even trying to ride her, they'll say you're afraid. Let them say it. Running Wolf's voice held no trace of wounded pride or anger. "I have learned that what people say matters much less than what is true." Elena found herself smiling despite her nervousness. "You're not like the other men who've come here." "I hope not." They all failed. That afternoon, Running Wolf sent his companions back to their camp in the mountains, promising to signal them when his task was complete. Elena watched him set up a simple shelter near the corral, not close enough to threaten Tempest, but near enough that the horse would have to get used to his presence. By evening, word had spread that the Apache brave was at the Mitchell ranch. Buck Carson rode out with 3 of his friends, clearly expecting to watch Running Wolf make his attempt on the horse. "Where's the big show?" Buck called out as he dismounted near Elena's porch. "Thought we'd see some fancy Indian horse magic." Elena bristled at his tone, but Running Wolf answered calmly from where he sat near his small fire. "There is no show tonight." "No show? What are you waiting for?" "The right time." Buck laughed and his friends joined in. "Right time? The horse is right there, Chief. What's the matter, afraid she'll throw you like she threw the rest of us?" Running Wolf continued eating his simple meal without looking up. "Fear is not shameful. Fear keeps us alive. Stupidity is what gets us killed." The insult was delivered so quietly and politely that it took Buck a moment to realize he'd been called stupid. His face turned red. "You calling me stupid?" "I am saying that rushing into danger without understanding it is unwise." Elena stepped forward before the situation could escalate. "Buck, I think you and your friends should head back to town. This is my property and Running Wolf is my guest." Buck's angry eyes moved between Elena and Running Wolf. "Guest? Elena, this is an Apache. You can't just—" "I can do whatever I want on my own land," Elena said firmly, "and I'm asking you to leave." After Buck and his friends rode away, grumbling and making threats, Elena approached Running Wolf's small camp. "Thank you for not making that worse." "Angry men make poor decisions," Running Wolf replied. "I did not want to make a poor decision because of his anger." Elena settled on a log across from his fire. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. "Why do you want to marry me? You don't even know me." Running Wolf considered the question seriously. "I know some things. I know you honor your father's wishes even when they seem impossible. I know you defend guests in your home, even when it makes others angry. I know you love that horse even though she has caused you nothing but trouble. How do you know I love her? You could have sold her or sent her away after your father died. Instead, you keep her safe and fed, even though she brings you suitors you do not want. Running Wolf poked at his fire with a stick. That is love. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. He was right. Despite all the trouble Tempest had caused, despite the danger and the failed suitors and the gossip, Elena had never seriously considered getting rid of the mare. My grandmother told me something once, Running Wolf continued. She said that the right woman would be like the right horse, beautiful, strong, and worth any amount of patience it took to win her trust. And you think I'm that woman? Running Wolf looked at her across the firelight, and Elena felt her breath catch at the intensity in his dark eyes. I think you might be, but first I must prove myself worthy of finding out. That night, Elena lay in her bed listening to the desert sounds and thinking about the Apache brave camped by her corral. Tomorrow would begin what might be a long journey toward an uncertain ending. But for the first time since her father's death, Elena felt something she hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. Dawn broke with the sound of nothing. Elena woke up expecting to hear the usual morning commotion. Tempest pacing restlessly in her corral, snorting and pawing at the ground. Instead, there was an unusual quiet that made Elena sit up in bed and look out her window. Running Wolf sat perfectly still about 20 feet from the corral fence. He wasn't looking at Tempest, wasn't trying to get her attention or call to her. He simply sat cross-legged on the ground, facing the rising sun, as motionless as a rock. Tempest stood on the far side of the corral, also perfectly still, watching him. Elena dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen to start breakfast. Through the window she could see that neither Running Wolf nor the horse had moved. It was like watching a contest of patience, except Running Wolf didn't seem to be competing at all. She took him a cup of coffee and a plate of eggs and biscuits, approaching slowly so as not to startle either him or the mare. "Good morning," she said quietly. Running Wolf accepted the food with a grateful nod but kept his voice low. "Good morning, Elena, thank you. How long have you been sitting here?" "Since before sunrise." Elena glanced at Tempest, who was still watching them but hadn't moved closer or farther away. "She's calmer than usual." "She is trying to understand me," Running Wolf explained, taking a careful bite of eggs. "Just as I am trying to understand her. By sitting still? By not being a threat. Every man who has come here has immediately tried to catch her, rope her, corner her. She expects attack, so she prepares to fight." He gestured gently toward the mare. "I am showing her that I am not here to attack." Elena settled on the ground beside him, far enough away not to crowd him but close enough to talk.
"How do you know this will work?"
"I do not know that it will, but I know that what others have tried has not worked." Running Wolf finished his breakfast and set the plate aside. "My grandfather taught me to hunt. He said the most important thing about hunting was not the killing, but the watching. You must watch your prey long enough to understand how it thinks, how it moves, what it fears. Only then can you be successful. But Tempest isn't prey. No. But the same idea applies. I must understand her before I can approach her." Elena spent the morning doing her usual ranch chores, feeding the cattle, checking the water troughs, mending a section of fence that had come loose. Every time she looked toward the corral, Running Wolf was still sitting in the same spot and Tempest was still watching him. By midday, the heat was becoming intense. Elena brought Running Wolf more water and a hat to shade his face from the sun. "Aren't you getting tired of sitting there?" "No," he replied simply. "This is important work." "Sitting still is work?" Running Wolf smiled slightly. "In my culture, we believe that stillness teaches us things that movement cannot. When you are still, you notice things you would miss if you were busy doing." "Like what?" "Like the way Tempest shifts her weight when the wind changes direction. Like how she flicks her ears toward sounds that are too quiet for us to hear. Like the fact that she has moved 3 steps closer to us since this morning." Elena looked at the mare and realized he was right. Tempest was definitely closer than she had been at dawn. Though the movement had been so gradual, Elena hadn't noticed it happening. "She's curious about you," Elena observed. "Yes. Curiosity is stronger than fear, but only when fear is not too great." Running Wolf accepted the water gratefully. "Each day I hope her curiosity will grow and her fear will shrink." "Each day? You're planning to do this every day?" "For as long as it takes." Elena thought about the other suitors who had come and gone, each one expecting to accomplish in an hour what Running Wolf was willing to spend weeks on. "The town folks are going to think you're crazy." "What do you think?" Elena considered the question seriously. I think maybe everyone else has been crazy, trying to force something that can't be forced. That afternoon, Buck Carson returned with an even larger group of spectators. Word had spread that the Apache was just sitting around doing nothing, and people were curious to see what they were calling the world's laziest marriage proposal. Still just sitting there, Chief? Buck called out as he approached with his friends. When you planning to actually try riding the horse? Running Wolf didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge that Buck was there. Elena noticed that Tempest had tensed at the sound of Buck's loud voice and backed away from the fence again. I'm talking to you, Buck said, his voice getting louder and angrier. Elena stood up from where she'd been sitting nearby. Buck, you're scaring the horse. Scaring the horse? That's rich, Elena. The horse is supposed to be scared. That's how you break him. He's not trying to break her. Buck laughed harshly. Of course he's not. He's scared to try. Look at him, just sitting there like a bump on a log. This is supposed to be a challenge, not a camping trip. Elena felt her temper rising, but before she could respond, Running Wolf spoke for the first time since Buck's arrival. If you would like to try riding her yourself, you are welcome to do so. The quiet offer seemed to deflate Buck's bluster. Everyone remembered his spectacular failure weeks earlier. That's not the point. The point is, you're supposed to be proving yourself, not wasting everyone's time. I am proving something, Running Wolf replied calmly. I am proving that I can be patient. Buck stormed off with his friends, muttering about crazy Indians and waste of time. But Elena noticed that a few of the spectators stayed, settling in to watch what was happening with new interest. Mrs. Patterson, Elena's elderly neighbor, approached with a thoughtful expression on her weathered face. Elena, dear, what exactly is that young man doing? He's getting to know Tempest, Elena explained. Getting to know her? He thinks she needs to trust him before he tries to ride her. Mrs. Patterson studied Running Wolf with sharp eyes. You know, my late husband used to gentle horses for the cavalry. He always said the hardest ones needed the most patience. She lowered her voice. That horse of yours, she's been hurt somehow, hasn't she? Not in body, but in spirit. Elena nodded. Running Wolf thinks so too. Smart man. And brave in his way. Takes more courage to wait than to rush in sometimes. As the sun began to set, Elena brought Running Wolf his evening meal. Tempest was now close enough to the fence that Elena could see the details of her beautiful face clearly. She's lovely, Elena murmured. Yes, and very tired. Tired? Tired of being afraid. Tired of fighting. Tired of being alone. Running Wolf accepted the food but continued watching the mare. She wants to trust someone. She is just afraid of what might happen if she does. Elena felt a stab of recognition. Since her father's death, she had felt exactly the same way. Wanting to trust someone. Wanting to let someone help her, but afraid of what she might lose if she did. How do you know all this just from watching her? Because I have felt the same way. Running Wolf's voice was gentle. When I was young, my village was attacked by soldiers. Many people died, including my parents. For a long time after that, I trusted no one. I fought everything and everyone. I thought fighting was the same as being strong. What changed? My grandmother. She did for me what I am trying to do for Tempest. She sat with me day after day and showed me that not everyone wanted to hurt me. She taught me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let yourself be gentle. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I'm sorry about your parents. Thank you. But their loss taught me something important. It taught me that life is too short to spend it afraid of everything. He looked at her then, and Elena saw something in his eyes that made her heart race. It taught me that some things are worth the risk of being hurt. That night, as Elena lay in bed, she found herself thinking not just about Tempest and Running Wolf, but about herself. Was she like the mare, so afraid of being hurt that she was missing out on something beautiful? And if so, what was she going to do about it? Outside her window, she could see the glow of Running Wolf's small campfire and the silhouette of Tempest, who had moved closer to the fence than Elena had ever seen her. Tomorrow would bring another day of patient watching, another small step toward trust. Elena found herself looking forward to it more than she wanted to admit. The fourth morning brought something Elena had never seen before. She woke early, as had become her habit since Running Wolf arrived, and looked out her window expecting to see the now familiar sight of him sitting motionless near the corral. Instead, She saw something that made her grab her robe and hurry outside. Tempest was standing at the fence closest to where Running Wolf sat. Not just near the fence. She was actually touching it with her nose, her head extended toward him. Running Wolf remained perfectly still, but Elena could see that his breathing had changed. He was excited, though he was careful not to show it. Elena approached as quietly as she could, not wanting to break whatever spell was happening between the man and the horse. As she got closer, she could hear Running Wolf speaking in Apache, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. "What are you saying to her?" Elena asked softly. "I am telling her she is safe. I am telling her she is beautiful. I am telling her that no one will hurt her while I am here." Running Wolf's eyes never left Tempest's face. "I am telling her the same things my grandmother used to tell me when I was afraid." Elena felt her heart swell. There was something so gentle, so pure about the moment that it almost took her breath away. This was nothing like the rough, aggressive approaches the other men had taken. This was like watching someone coax a wild bird to land on their hand. Tempest took another step closer, until her nose was almost touching the fence post where Running Wolf sat. Elena held her breath, afraid that any movement might break the fragile trust that was being built. Then, slowly, carefully, Running Wolf extended his hand toward the fence. Not reaching for Tempest, not trying to grab or catch her, just offering, letting her choose. For a long moment, nothing happened. Tempest stood frozen, her eyes fixed on Running Wolf's outstretched hand. Elena could see the war happening inside the mare. Curiosity fighting against fear. Trust battling with caution. Then so gently that Elena almost missed it, Tempest stretched her neck forward and touched her nose to Running Wolf's fingertips. Elena gasped, and immediately worried that the sound might startle the horse. But Tempest seemed lost in the moment, exploring Running Wolf's scent and the feel of his skin against her muzzle. "Good girl," Running Wolf murmured in English, then repeated it in Apache. "Good, brave girl." The contact lasted only a few seconds before Tempest pulled back, but she didn't flee to the far side of the corral as Elena expected. Instead, she remained near the fence, watching Running Wolf with what looked like wonder. "I can't believe that just happened," Elena whispered. "It is a beginning," Running Wolf replied. But Elena could hear the joy in his voice despite his calm words. Over the next few hours, the moment repeated itself several times. Tempest would approach the fence, touch her nose to Running Wolf's hand, then retreat to think about what had happened. Each time she seemed a little less afraid, a little more curious. By mid-morning, Elena found herself sitting beside Running Wolf, fascinated by what she was witnessing. "How did you know she would do that?" "I did not know. I hoped." Running Wolf smiled, and Elena realized it was the first time she'd seen him truly smile since he arrived. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less serious. But I believed she wanted to trust someone. She just needed to know it was safe. The other men, they never gave her a chance to choose, did they? No. They saw her wildness as something to be conquered rather than something to be understood. Running Wolf glanced at Elena. "Your father was wise to make this challenge. A man who cannot be gentle with a frightened animal cannot be gentle with anything." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. Was he talking about horses, or was he talking about her? Before she could ask, they were interrupted by approaching visitors. Dr. Morrison, the town physician, was riding up the trail with his wife and teenage daughter. Unlike Buck Carson's loud, demanding group, the Morrison family approached respectfully. "Good morning, Elena," Dr. Morrison called out. "We hope we're not intruding." "Not at all, Doc. Come on up." The Morrison family dismounted and approached the corral area, but they kept their voices low and their movements calm. Elena appreciated their consideration. "We heard about what's happening here," Mrs. Morrison said quietly. "Our Sarah was curious to see the famous horse." Sarah Morrison was 16 with bright eyes and an obvious love for animals. She gasped when she saw Tempest. "Oh, she's beautiful, but she looks so sad." Elena was surprised by the girl's observation. "Sad? Look at her eyes. She looks lonely." Sarah turned to Running Wolf. "Are you really going to ride her?" "I hope to someday," Running Wolf replied. "But first she must want me to." "That's smart," Sarah said with the confidence of youth. "I wouldn't want someone to ride me if I didn't like them." Dr. Morrison chuckled. "Sarah has strong opinions about most things." "Sarah has good instincts about animals," Running Wolf said seriously. "She sees what many adults miss." As if responding to the praise, Tempest approached the fence again. This time, instead of just touching Running Wolf's hand, she allowed him to gently stroke her nose. The horse's eyes closed briefly as if she was savoring the gentle contact. "Oh my," Mrs. Morrison breathed. "I've never seen her let anyone touch her." "She is learning to trust," Running Wolf explained. "Trust must be earned slowly." Dr. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been practicing medicine for 20 years, and I've learned that healing works the same way. You can't force someone to get better. You have to give them reasons to want to heal." "Is Tempest sick?" Sarah asked. "Not in her body," Running Wolf replied, "but something hurt her spirit. Until her spirit heals, her body will fight anyone who tries to control it." Elena watched Running Wolf as he spoke. There was such wisdom in his words, such understanding of pain and healing that went deeper than physical wounds. She found herself wondering what had hurt his spirit, and how his grandmother had helped him heal from it. After the Morrisons left, Elena and Running Wolf settled back into their quiet vigil. Tempest continued to make small advances, allowing longer touches, standing closer to the fence, even nickering softly when Running Wolf spoke to her in Apache. "What are you telling her now?" Elena asked during one of these gentle conversations. "I am telling her about my grandmother's horses. She had 3 mares that she raised from foals. They were like her children." Running Wolf's voice was soft with memory. "I am telling Tempest about how gentle they were, how they would come when she called them, how they trusted her completely." "Do you think she understands the stories?" "I think she understands the feeling behind them. Animals are very good at reading hearts." Elena fell quiet thinking about that. If animals were good at reading hearts, what was Tempest reading in Running Wolf's? And what would she read in Elena's? As the afternoon wore on, something else began to happen. Tempest started following Running Wolf's movements with her eyes, turning her head to track him whenever he shifted position or reached for water. It was as if she was becoming genuinely interested in him as an individual, not just wary of him as a potential threat. "She likes you," Elena observed. "I hope so, but more importantly, she is beginning to believe I mean what I say when I tell her she is safe." "How can you tell?" Running Wolf pointed to Tempest's ears, which were forward and relaxed instead of flattened against her head. "Her body language is changing. She is not preparing to fight anymore. She is preparing to listen." As evening approached and Elena prepared to head inside for the night, she found herself reluctant to leave. Watching Running Wolf work with Tempest had become the most interesting part of her day. There was something almost magical about seeing trust being built one small moment at a time. "Running Wolf," she said as she gathered up the empty dishes from their evening meal. "Yes? Thank you. For what?" Elena looked at Tempest, who was standing peacefully near the fence, and then at Running Wolf, whose patient presence had made it all possible. "For showing me what gentleness looks like." Running Wolf met her eyes, and Elena felt that same flutter in her chest that she'd been experiencing more and more often. Gentleness is not weakness, Elena. Sometimes it is the strongest thing of all. That night, Elena dreamed of wild horses running free across endless plains, and of a gentle voice calling them home. The breakthrough came on a morning when the desert air was particularly still and quiet. Elena woke to the sound of Running Wolf's voice, but something was different. Instead of the gentle murmuring she'd grown accustomed to, there was urgency in his tone. Not alarm exactly, but focused attention that made her dress quickly and hurry outside. She found Running Wolf standing at the corral fence, his hand extended through the rails. Tempest was pressed against the fence from the other side, allowing him to stroke her neck and shoulder. But it wasn't the increased trust that had caught Running Wolf's attention. It was something he was feeling beneath his gentle touch. "Elena," he said without turning around. "Bring me water and clean cloth. Is she hurt? I need to understand something. Please, quickly but quietly." Elena fetched the items from the house, her heart racing. When she returned, Running Wolf was running his hands carefully along Tempest's left front leg, his fingers exploring with the careful attention of someone looking for something specific. "What is it?" Elena whispered. "Here." Running Wolf's fingers paused at a spot just above Tempest's knee. "Do you feel this?" Elena moved closer and carefully placed her hand where Running Wolf indicated. Beneath the mare's silky coat, she could feel a ridge of bone that didn't match the smooth lines of the other leg. "It's different. Rough. It is an old break, badly healed." Running Wolf's voice was quiet, but Elena could hear the sadness in it. This is why she fights. Elena stared at him. A broken leg? When she was young, probably very young, she broke this bone. But no one said it properly. No one cared for her while it healed. The bone grew back wrong. Running Wolf continued his gentle examination, and Tempest stood perfectly still as if she knew he was trying to help. Every time someone tries to mount her, every time weight is put on this leg, it causes her pain. Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. She's been in pain this whole time. Not always. The break is old and healed, so it probably does not hurt her when she walks normally. But when she is forced to carry weight, especially if someone tries to control her movements. Running Wolf shook his head. She learned that fighting was the only way to protect herself. Elena remembered all the men who had tried to break Tempest, all the times they'd called her vicious or evil or possessed. She wasn't being mean. She was protecting herself. Yes. And she learned to fight before anyone even tried to hurt her, because she knew what was coming. Running Wolf wet the cloth Elena had brought and began gently cleaning around the old injury. She became wild to survive. Elena watched Tempest's face as Running Wolf worked. The mare's eyes were calm, almost grateful. For the first time in years, someone was touching her injury with understanding instead of force. Can it be fixed? Elena asked. The bone cannot be reset now, it has been too long. But the pain can be managed. There are ways to strengthen the leg, ways to support it. Running Wolf looked at Elena. There are plants that can help with pain and inflammation. My grandmother taught me. You can help her. I believe so, but it will take time, and she will need to want to be helped. Elena looked at Tempest, who was now nuzzling Running Wolf's shoulder with obvious affection. I think she wants to be helped very much. Over the next few hours, Running Wolf examined Tempest thoroughly, checking every inch of her for other injuries or problems. Elena marveled at how the horse stood perfectly still for his ministrations, occasionally even moving to give him better access to whatever he was examining. She trusts you completely now, Elena observed. Trust is like a door, Running Wolf replied as he felt along Tempest's back for signs of soreness. Once it opens all the way. She has decided I am safe, so she will let me do whatever I need to do to help her. What would have happened if the other men had figured out about her leg? Running Wolf was quiet for a long moment. I do not know. Some men might have tried to help. But most, he shook his head. Most would have seen it as weakness to exploit, not pain to heal. Elena felt a surge of anger at the thought. They would have hurt her more, perhaps, or they would have given up and called her useless. Running Wolf finished his examination and began stroking Tempest's neck in long, soothing movements. Your father was wise to make this challenge. It took someone who understood pain to understand her. Is that why you understood? Because of what happened to your parents. Running Wolf nodded. When you have been hurt, really hurt, you learn to recognize pain in others. You learn that sometimes what looks like anger is really fear, and what looks like strength is really protection. Elena thought about her own life since her father's death, how she'd been sharp with suitors, suspicious of help, determined to prove she could manage alone. Had she been protecting herself the same way Tempest had? What happens now? She asked. Now I begin to help her heal. And then when she is ready, I will ask her if she would like to carry me. Ask her? Running Wolf smiled. You will see. That afternoon, Running Wolf disappeared for several hours, leaving Elena to watch over Tempest. The mare seemed restless without him, pacing near the fence and nickering whenever she heard sounds that might indicate his return. You miss him already, don't you, girl? Elena said softly. I know how you feel. When Running Wolf returned, he carried a collection of desert plants Elena didn't recognize. He set up a small workspace near his campfire and began preparing what looked like medicine. What are those? Elena asked, fascinated despite herself. This one reduces swelling, Running Wolf said, holding up a plant with thick, succulent leaves. This one helps with pain. This one strengthens bone and muscle. He began grinding the plants with a smooth stone, creating a green paste that smelled sharp but not unpleasant. My grandmother learned these remedies from her grandmother, who learned from hers. This knowledge has been passed down for many generations. Elena watched him work, noting the careful precision with which he prepared each mixture. How do you know how much of each to use? Experience. And prayer. Running Wolf looked up at her. Healing is not just about plants and medicine. It is about believing that healing is possible. When the preparations were complete, Running Wolf approached Tempest with the plant mixtures. The mare allowed him to apply the medicine to her old injury, standing perfectly still as he massaged the healing paste into her leg. "How long before we know if it's working?" Elena asked. "A few days, maybe a week." Running Wolf finished treating the leg and stepped back. "But I think we will see changes soon. Pain that has been carried for years does not let go easily. But when it begins to let go, the relief comes quickly." That evening, as Elena prepared dinner, she found herself humming, something she hadn't done since her father died. There was something hopeful about the day's discoveries, something that made her feel lighter than she had in months. "You seem happy," Running Wolf observed when she brought him his meal. "I am happy. For Tempest, I mean. She's been suffering all this time, and now she doesn't have to anymore." "And for yourself?" Elena paused, a forkful of food halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "You have been carrying pain too. Different pain, but pain nonetheless. Sometimes healing one hurt makes space for healing others." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. He was right. Watching Tempest begin to heal was making Elena realize how much of her own pain she'd been carrying around. How much of her own wildness was really just protection. "I miss my father," she said quietly. "Of course you do. Love does not end when death comes. I miss feeling safe. I miss having someone to depend on." Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I've been so scared, Running Wolf. Scared of being alone. Scared of being taken advantage of. Scared of making the wrong choice." Running Wolf set down his plate and moved closer to Elena. "Fear is not shameful. Fear is wise. But fear can also become a cage if we let it." Elena looked at him through her tears. "How do I know when to be afraid and when to trust?" "You listen to your heart. Really listen. Not just to the fear, but to the hope underneath it." Running Wolf reached out and gently touched Elena's hand. "What does your heart tell you about me?" Elena felt her breath catch. His touch was warm and gentle, just like his touch with Tempest. It tells me you're good. It tells me you're safe. Then trust that. Trust your heart." As the stars came out overhead, Elena sat beside Running Wolf in comfortable silence, watching Tempest graze peacefully in the moonlight. For the first time since her father died, she felt like she might not have to face tomorrow alone. And somewhere in her chest, old wounds began to consider the possibility of healing. The change in Tempest was remarkable and swift. Within 3 days of Running Wolf beginning his plant medicine treatments, the mare's entire demeanor had shifted. Elena noticed it first in the way Tempest moved. There was less stiffness in her gait, less favoring of her injured leg. But more than that, there was a lightness in her spirit that Elena had never seen before. "Look at her," Elena marveled as she watched Tempest trot around her corral, her movements fluid and graceful. "It's like she's a different horse." Running Wolf smiled as he prepared the morning's medicine mixture. "She is the same horse she always was. She is just not hiding behind her pain anymore." Elena had been watching Running Wolf's treatment process with growing fascination. Each morning, he would prepare fresh poultices from desert plants, warming them over his small fire until they reached exactly the right temperature. Then he would spend nearly an hour massaging the medicine into Tempest's leg, speaking to her in Apache the entire time. "What do you say to her during the treatments?" Elena asked. "I tell her that the pain is leaving. I tell her that her body is remembering how to be strong. I tell her that she is safe to let go of the hurt she has been carrying." Running Wolf worked the healing paste into Tempest's leg with gentle, circular motions. Words are medicine too. Elena could see the truth in that. Tempest's eyes would grow soft and dreamy during these treatment sessions, as if Running Wolf's voice was as healing as his touch. But the physical treatments were only part of what Running Wolf was doing. Elena had begun to notice other changes in his approach to the mare. Instead of just sitting by the fence, he now moved around the corral's perimeter, always staying on the outside but letting Tempest get used to seeing him from different angles. "Why are you walking around like that?" Elena asked one afternoon. "I am teaching her that I can move without being a threat. Before, when men moved quickly around her, it meant they were trying to catch her or corner her." Running Wolf paused at the gate of the corral, his hand resting on the latch. "Now she is learning that movement can be calm, predictable, safe." Elena watched as Tempest followed Running Wolf's progress around the fence, her ears forward with interest rather than flattened with fear. "She's watching you like she's trying to learn something." "She is. She is learning my patterns, my habits. She is deciding whether she can predict what I will do. Running Wolf completed his circuit and returned to his usual spot. Trust grows from predictability. If she can anticipate my actions, she feels safer. Is that why you do everything the same way every day? The medicine at the same time, the walking pattern, even the way you sit? Yes, consistency is a gift you give to frightened creatures. It tells them the world can be dependable. Elena thought about that as she went about her own daily chores. Had her father been consistent with her in that same way? She remembered how he'd always had coffee ready when she woke up, always checked the fence line at the same time each afternoon, always tucked her in with the same words when she was small. Maybe that consistency had been his way of helping her feel safe in an uncertain world. By the end of the first week of treatments, Tempest was allowing Running Wolf to enter the corral itself. Elena held her breath the first time she saw him unlatch the gate and step inside, but Tempest merely lifted her head from grazing and nickered a greeting. "Incredible," Elena whispered. Running Wolf moved slowly through the corral, letting Tempest approach him instead of the other way around. When she did, he spent long minutes simply stroking her neck and talking to her before beginning her medicine treatment. "She loves those treatments," Elena observed. "The treatments feel good, but more than that, they represent something she has never had before. Care without conditions." Running Wolf worked the healing paste into Tempest's leg while she stood perfectly still. No one has ever touched her injury with the intention to heal, only to use or to hurt. Elena felt her heart clench at the thought. That's so sad. It was. But now it is different. Running Wolf finished the treatment and simply stood with his hand on Tempest's shoulder. Now she knows what gentle care feels like. As the second week progressed, Running Wolf began introducing new elements to his routine. Instead of just treating Tempest's leg, he began massaging her neck and back, checking for areas of tension or discomfort. Her whole body was affected by that old injury, he explained to Elena. When one part hurts, other parts compensate. Now that the leg is healing, the rest of her body can relax too. Elena watched in amazement as Running Wolf worked his way methodically along Tempest's spine, his hands finding and releasing knots of tension the mare had probably carried for years. Tempest's eyes would half close with pleasure, and she would lean into his touch like a cat seeking affection. "She's never looked so relaxed," Elena said. She is remembering what it feels like to be comfortable in her own body. But the most remarkable development came during the third week, when Running Wolf began what he called trust exercises. These weren't attempts to ride Tempest, but rather gentle tests of her willingness to cooperate. "Watch," Running Wolf said to Elena one morning. He approached Tempest and placed both hands on her back, applying gentle downward pressure. Instead of bucking or shying away, Tempest simply shifted her weight to accommodate the pressure. Running Wolf gradually increased the weight, leaning more and more of his body against her side. "She's letting you put weight on her," Elena breathed. "She is telling me that the pain is manageable now, that she trusts me not to hurt her." Running Wolf straightened up and stroked Tempest's neck. "But this is not the same as riding. This is partnership." Elena was beginning to understand the difference. Everything Running Wolf did was a conversation with Tempest, a request rather than a demand. He never forced her to do anything. He simply offered opportunities and let her choose how to respond. "My grandfather taught me this way with horses," Running Wolf explained as he worked through a series of exercises with Tempest. "He said that a horse that chooses to carry you is worth 10 horses that are forced to carry you. Because they want to help instead of being made to help? Yes, and because when trust is real, the horse will take care of the rider as much as the rider takes care of the horse." Elena found herself thinking about that principle in relation to her own life. All the men who had come to attempt her father's challenge had been focused on conquering, on winning, on proving their dominance. None of them had been interested in partnership. "Is that what you're hoping for with me too?" she asked quietly. "Partnership instead of conquest?" Running Wolf paused in his work with Tempest and looked directly at Elena. "Yes, I want you to choose me, not because you are forced to by circumstances or pressure, but because you want to. Because you trust me. Because you believe we could take care of each other." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she held his gaze. "And if I don't choose you? Then I will be disappointed, but I will accept your choice. just as I would accept it if Tempest decided she did not want to carry me. Even after all this work? All this time? The work is not wasted if it helps heal old wounds, even if it does not lead to what I hoped for. Running Wolf returned his attention to Tempest, but Elena could see emotion in his profile. Healing is always worthwhile, whether it leads to partnership or simply to peace. That afternoon, Elena found herself studying her own reflection in the kitchen window. She could see changes in herself just as dramatic as the changes in Tempest. The worry lines around her eyes had softened. She smiled more easily. She felt lighter, less burdened by the weight of constant vigilance. Running Wolf's patient approach to Tempest was healing something in Elena, too. His gentleness, his consistency, his respect for boundaries, all of it was teaching her that strength didn't have to mean hardness, that protection didn't have to mean isolation. As evening approached and she prepared to join Running Wolf for their usual quiet meal by his campfire, Elena realized that somewhere along the way, she had stopped thinking of him as a suitor attempting a challenge. She had started thinking of him as a friend. More than a friend, the thought both thrilled and terrified her. But as she watched him through the window, carefully preparing Tempest's evening medicine, with the same patient attention he brought to everything else, Elena felt something inside her chest begin to open like a flower turning toward the sun. Maybe it was time to stop protecting herself so fiercely. Maybe it was time to trust that some people really did mean what they said when they promised to be gentle. Word had spread throughout the territory that something extraordinary was happening at the Mitchell Ranch. For 3 weeks, people had watched Running Wolf's patient approach with curiosity, skepticism, and growing amazement. What had started as entertainment, watching another man fail to ride the unrideable horse, had transformed into something else entirely. People began making the journey not to see a spectacle, but to witness what many were calling a miracle. On the morning Elena would remember for the rest of her life, nearly 50 people had gathered along the fence line. Families had come from towns 30 miles away. Even some Apache from Running Wolf's own band had arrived during the night. Led by an elderly woman Elena guessed was his grandmother. "Are you nervous?" Helena asked Running Wolf as they watched the crowd assemble. "Yes," he admitted. "Not about Tempest, I trust her completely now. But I am nervous about disappointing all these people if something goes wrong." Elena looked at the faces in the crowd. There was Dr. Morrison with his family, Mrs. Patterson with her 2 grown sons, even Buck Carson standing sullenly at the back with his arms crossed. But most of the faces showed expectation and hope, rather than the cruel anticipation of earlier spectators. "They're not here to see you fail," Elena said softly. "They're here because they want to see something beautiful happen." Running Wolf nodded, but Elena could see the weight of expectation in his shoulders. This was no longer just about winning her hand in marriage. It had become a symbol of something larger. A test of whether gentleness could triumph over force, whether patience could succeed where aggression had failed. "Tempest looks calm," Elena observed. The mare was grazing peacefully in her corral, seemingly unbothered by the crowd of observers. "She trusts me now. She knows I will not hurt her no matter what happens." Running Wolf took a deep breath. "Are you ready?" Elena realized she was holding her breath. "Are you really going to try to ride her today?" "I am going to ask her if she is ready. If she says yes, then yes. How will you know what she's saying?" Running Wolf smiled, and Elena saw both confidence and tenderness in his expression. "You will know too. When you see it, you will understand." Running Wolf approached the corral gate, moving with the same calm deliberation Elena had watched for weeks. The crowd fell silent, sensing that something significant was about to happen. But what happened next was nothing like what anyone expected. Instead of entering the corral and attempting to mount Tempest in any conventional way, Running Wolf simply opened the gate and stood beside it. Then he did something that made the entire crowd gasp. He lay down on the ground. Elena heard murmurs of confusion ripple through the spectators. Buck Carson's voice rose above the rest. "What the hell is he doing?" But Elena was watching Tempest, and what she saw made her heart race. The mare had lifted her head at the sound of the opening gate, and now she was looking at Running Wolf with what could only be described as concern. When he lay down, Tempest immediately approached, nickering softly. Running Wolf spoke to her in Apache, his voice carrying clearly in the desert air. Though Elena couldn't understand the words, the tone was unmistakably one of request, not command. Tempest walked closer until she was standing directly over Running Wolf. Elena held her breath, afraid that the horse might accidentally step on him. But Tempest moved with careful precision, clearly aware of exactly where Running Wolf lay beneath her. Then, to the amazement of everyone watching, Tempest began to lower herself to the ground. "My God," Dr. Morrison whispered. "She's lying down." Elena had never seen anything like it. Tempest folded her legs beneath her and settled onto the ground beside Running Wolf, who remained perfectly still throughout the process. When the mare was fully reclined, Running Wolf slowly sat up and placed one hand on her neck. The crowd was dead silent. Even Buck Carson had stopped his grumbling to stare in amazement. Running Wolf spoke to Tempest again, and the mare turned her head to look at him. Elena could swear she saw the horse nod as if answering a question. Slowly, carefully, Running Wolf shifted his position until he was sitting across Tempest's back, while she remained lying down. The mare showed no signs of distress or resistance. If anything, she seemed pleased with the arrangement. "This is impossible," someone in the crowd breathed. But Elena was beginning to understand. Running Wolf wasn't conquering Tempest or breaking her will. He was participating in something she was freely offering. The horse was choosing to let him ride. After several minutes in this position, Running Wolf spoke to Tempest once more. The mare's ears twitched, and then she began to rise, lifting herself carefully to her feet with Running Wolf still on her back. The crowd erupted in gasps and exclamations, but Elena barely heard them. She was transfixed by what she was seeing. Tempest stood perfectly still, her head high and proud, while Running Wolf sat on her back as if he belonged there. There was no battle, no struggle, no submission. There was only partnership. Running Wolf leaned forward and whispered something in the mare's ear. Tempest responded by taking a single, graceful step forward. Then another. Within moments, they were moving together in perfect harmony, not as conqueror and conquered, but as partners in an elegant dance. Elena felt tears streaming down her cheeks. This wasn't what anyone had expected when her father made his impossible challenge. This was something far more beautiful than anyone had imagined. Running Wolf guided Tempest through a series of movements that showcased not his dominance over her, but their mutual trust. The mare responded to his lightest touch, his gentlest request. She arched her neck proudly, her movements fluid and powerful, no longer the angry, pain-filled creature she had been for so long. "She's not just letting him ride her," Elena whispered to herself. "She's dancing with him." After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Running Wolf brought Tempest to a halt in the center of the corral. He dismounted not by jumping down but by sliding carefully from her back and landing gently on the ground. Tempest immediately turned to nuzzle his shoulder as if thanking him for the experience. The crowd exploded into applause, but Elena barely heard it. She was staring at Running Wolf and Tempest, finally understanding what her father had really been testing for. Not the ability to dominate or control, but the wisdom to recognize that some things were too precious to be forced, the patience to earn what could not be taken, the gentleness to heal what had been broken. Running Wolf approached the fence where Elena stood, leading Tempest beside him. The mare walked calmly, showing no signs of the wildness that had defined her for so long. "She is healed," Running Wolf said simply. "Her body, her spirit, she is whole again." Elena looked into Tempest's eyes and saw something she had never seen there before. Peace. The anger was gone, the fear was gone, even the loneliness was gone. In their place was a quiet confidence, a settled contentment that made the mare more beautiful than she had ever been. "You did it," Elena whispered. "You really did it." "We did it," Running Wolf corrected. Tempest chose to trust. I only gave her reasons to. Elena looked at Running Wolf, really looked at him, and felt her heart make a choice as clear and definitive as the one Tempest had made. This man who had spent weeks earning a frightened horse's trust, who had healed old wounds with patience and plant medicine, who had asked for partnership instead of demanding submission, this was the man she wanted to spend her life with. "Running Wolf," she said, her voice steady despite the tears still flowing down her cheeks. "Yes, yes." He studied her face, understanding immediately what she was saying yes to. "Are you certain?" Elena looked at Tempest, who was watching their conversation with intelligent eyes, then back at Running Wolf. "I'm certain. I choose you." I choose us. The crowd cheered again, but Elena and Running Wolf barely heard them. They were too busy looking at each other, seeing the future stretching out ahead of them like an open trail leading to beautiful unknown country. And beside them, Tempest nickered softly as if she approved of their choice. The wedding took place 3 months later, in the shadow of the red rocks that overlooked the Mitchell Ranch. Elena had never seen such a gathering. Members of Running Wolf's Apache band sat alongside townspeople from 3 different counties. Dr. Morrison served as the official witness, while Running Wolf's grandmother, a woman named Dancing Moon, performed the Apache wedding ceremonies. The combination of traditions created something entirely new, a celebration that honored both cultures without compromising either. But the most honored guest at the wedding was Tempest herself. Elena had insisted that the mayor be included in the ceremony, and Running Wolf had agreed immediately. Tempest stood near the wedding party, decorated with ribbons and wildflowers, as calm and peaceful as if she attended weddings every day. Children from both Apache and settler families took turns offering her treats and gentle pats, marveling at how friendly the once fierce horse had become. "Hard to believe that's the same animal that nearly killed me," Buck Carson admitted to Elena during the celebration afterward. He'd been surprised to receive an invitation to the wedding, but Elena had insisted. "I mean, she was like a devil horse before. Now look at her, gentle as a lamb." "She was never a devil," Elena replied, watching Tempest accept apple slices from Sarah Morrison. "She was just hurt and scared. Sometimes those look the same on the outside." Buck shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, well, I guess I never thought about it that way." Elena smiled at him. Buck wasn't a bad man, just limited in his understanding. It's easy to miss when you're not looking for it. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and stories shared between the 2 communities. Elena found herself moving between groups, equally comfortable with the Apache women who taught her traditional songs and the settler families she'd known all her life. Running Wolf had been right about partnership. It wasn't about one side dominating the other, but about both sides choosing to create something new together. As the sun began to set, Elena and Running Wolf found themselves alone for a few moments, sitting on the porch of the ranch house that was now their shared home. In the distance, they could see Tempest grazing peacefully in her corral, no longer pacing restlessly but moving with the easy contentment of a horse who knew she was safe. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if my father had made a different condition?" Elena asked, her head resting on Running Wolf's shoulder. "Sometimes, but I think your father chose the right test." Running Wolf's arm tightened around her. He knew that the kind of man worthy of you would be the kind of man who could see past Tempest's wildness to the pain underneath. "And if you hadn't been able to heal her, then I would not have been worthy of either of you." Running Wolf was quiet for a moment. "But I think your father knew something else too." "What's that?" "I think he knew that healing Tempest would heal you as well." Elena considered that. Running Wolf was right. Watching him work with the mare, seeing gentleness triumph over force, learning that patience could accomplish what aggression could not, all of it had changed something fundamental in Elena herself. She had learned to trust again, to open her heart despite the risk of being hurt. "My grandmother says that horses are mirrors," Running Wolf continued. "They reflect back what we show them. Tempest was wild because the world had been harsh to her, but when she was shown kindness, she reflected that back too. Is that what happened with us? We reflected each other's kindness." "I think so. You showed me acceptance when others showed suspicion. I showed you gentleness when you expected demands. We created something good between us." As the weeks turned into months, the story of Running Wolf and Tempest spread far beyond the Arizona territory. Visitors came from hundreds of miles away to see the horse that had been tamed through healing, rather than breaking, and to meet the couple whose courtship had become legendary. But Elena and Running Wolf discovered that their story was about more than just one man, one woman, and one horse. It had become a symbol of what was possible when different cultures chose cooperation over conflict, when understanding replaced fear, when patience was valued over force. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Running Wolf's knowledge of the land and weather patterns, combined with Elena's understanding of cattle and business, created a partnership that was stronger than either could have achieved alone. They expanded their operation to include horse training, using Running Wolf's gentle methods to help other problem horses that had been written off as hopeless. Tempest became their first success story and their most beloved teacher. The mare seemed to understand that she had a role to play in helping other frightened animals learn to trust again. She would stand quietly while nervous horses were introduced to her corral, her calm presence helping them realize that humans could be safe. "She's teaching them what you taught her," Elena observed one day as they watched Tempest help gentle a young stallion that had been abused by his previous owner. "She is teaching them what you taught me," Running Wolf replied. That taking a chance on trust can lead to something beautiful. 5 years after their wedding, Elena and Running Wolf had 3 children and a ranch that was famous throughout the Southwest for its humane horse training methods. Visitors came not just to see Tempest but to learn the techniques that had transformed a vicious horse into a gentle, willing partner. But perhaps the most important lesson their story taught was simpler than any training method: that healing was possible, that gentleness was a form of strength, and that the best relationships, whether between humans or between humans and animals, were built on mutual respect and freely given trust. Elena often thought about her father's final wish as she watched her children play in the same corral where Tempest had once paced in angry solitude. The mare was older now, her black coat showing silver around her muzzle. But she was still beautiful, still graceful, still proof that love could triumph over fear. Tom Mitchell's impossible condition had given his daughter more than just a husband. It had given her a new understanding of what strength really meant, a partnership that honored both tradition and innovation, and a love story that would be told for generations to come. Every evening, as the desert sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, Elena and Running Wolf would sit on their porch and watch Tempest graze peacefully in the fading light. The mare who had once been wild with pain and fear now moved with the quiet confidence of a creature who knew she was cherished. And in that transformation, from wildness to peace, from fear to trust, from pain to healing, lay the true magic of their story. Years later, when visitors would ask Elena what had made her father's challenge so special, she would walk them to Tempest's corral and point to the mare who had taught them all so much. "My father didn't just want to find me a husband," she would explain. "He wanted to find me a partner who understood that some things can't be taken by force. They can only be given freely." He wanted someone who knew that healing matters more than winning, that gentleness is stronger than roughness, and that the most beautiful relationships come from choice, not conquest. The legend of the Apache brave who tamed the wild horse through love instead of force spread far beyond the Arizona territory, inspiring countless others to choose patience over pressure, understanding over domination. But for Elena and Running Wolf, the most important part of their story wasn't the legend it had become. It was the quiet moments, the way Running Wolf still spoke to their horses in Apache before riding them, the way Tempest still nickered with joy whenever she saw him approaching, the way their children learned that true strength came from protecting what you loved rather than controlling it. Tom Mitchell's dying wish had created more than a marriage. It had created a new way of seeing the world, where wildness wasn't something to be broken but something to be understood, where fear wasn't an enemy to be conquered but a wound to be healed, and where love grew not from submission but from the brave choice to trust again. And every sunset, as Tempest grazed peacefully in the golden light, she stood as living proof that miracles were possible when hearts were patient enough to wait for them.